This is 99% Invisible. I'm Roman Mars. On any given day, there are a few different kinds of songs rattling around in my head. Some are just classics, like literal classics. Then there are songs that are just in there that are my own favorites, songs that have carved out a space in my brain because I listen to them over and over and over. That's the song Solidarity by the band Scream. Oh, that song is so good. And then there's this other category of memorable songs, the ones that we all just kind of know. Songs that somehow, without anyone's permission, snuck their way into our collective unconscious and now are just lingering there for all eternity. These songs aren't necessarily good, but they usually have some undeniably catchy quality to them, a hook that worms.
The House on Mango Street by the Mexican-American writer Sandra Cisneros has been taught in high schools across the U.S. for decades. She's received a MacArthur Genius Award, a National Medal of Arts, and many other accolades. Sandra Cisneros grew up in an immigrant household where it was assumed she would marry as her primary destiny. I love how she strikingly, fiercely has given voice to the choice to be single, and single or not, to know solitude as sacred. It was a lovely and lively experience to bring her to our studio on Loring Park in Minneapolis with an audience that included many delighted first-generation Latina teenagers.
I think it's very muddied in your 20s. I think the 20s is so hard for women.
I know, it's so hard, and you get told that it's the best years of your life,
it's
and it's
worst.
just not true.
Yeah. No, it's the worst. But I always tell my students, don't worry, it only...
From NPR, this is Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedantam. When Eitan Hirsch was growing up, newspapers were a central part of the family's daily routine. If you were a member of the household, you kept up with the news.
My parents raised me and my siblings in a politically engaged environment. At least I thought so. You know, we knew what was going on in the news. The newspaper was delivered to our home.
After Eitan went off to college, his father kept reading, listening to the radio, staying up to speed. And then, a few years ago, Eitan learned that his dad had developed a new habit. He would lie on his bed at night and watch cable news.
Out front next, breaking news, Trump's tantrum, a jaw-dropping...
Eitan, now a political scientist, found this puzzling.
I've never really personally gotten into cable news. It's never been something I've enjoyed. I asked him why I was doing it, and he said, you know, it's our duty to be informed. And I said to him, yeah, but you already are informed.
Hi, I'm Wendy Zuckerman, and you're listening to Science Versus from Gimlet. On today's show, we're doing something a little different. We're bringing you a couple of stories about one of the most underrated creatures in the animal queendom. You see, every time someone does a survey about people's favorite animals, you know who wins? Tigers, dolphins, maybe gorillas. But you know who you don't see on these lists? Ants. Yeah, ants. But in the last few years, scientists have documented some rather unexpected and very cool behavior in ants, and it's making us see these little creatures in a whole new light. So in this episode, we're going to tell you those stories. They're stories of survival, heroism, and how on earth can an ant do that-ism?
Hey, this is Chrissy Hohobashvili. I'm the Acting Chief of External Affairs for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The following episode of Ear Hustle contains language and descriptions of graphic violence that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Discretion is advised.
I had a very ritualized process that I went through. It was almost like every day preparing almost for a battle. I had a silhouette target up in the basement, and I'd spend 5 minutes drawing and dry firing against that target. I would run scenarios in my head in spare moments, about, well, what happens if some guy comes out of the alley and points a gun at my patrol car? What am I going to do? If I'm in a grocery or, a liquor store, getting a Coke or something, and somebody bursts in with a shotgun, what am I going to do? If I'm on a burglary call and, I find a suspect crawling through a window, what am I going to do? It was a perpetual, constant state of.
A content warning. This episode includes depictions of torture and human degradation that some people will find hard to listen to. Chenj, I'm still thinking about that thing we heard from Woody Holton, the historian, near the end of the last episode.
Oh, yeah.
The thing he said about there being a tension between democracy on one hand and on the other, capital investment, economic growth, or, well, at least in the minds of some important people.
Yeah, man. That stuck with me. I mean, it's like more democracy hurts economic growth, right? Because he wasn't talking about Mussolini either, right? He was talking about the framers of the Constitution in 1787.
Yes.
That they thought that tension was real.
Let's just play the tape again. Here's Woody Holton of the University of South Carolina. He's a leading scholar of the American Revolutionary period.
From PRX, this is the Moth Radio Hour. I'm Jennifer Hickson. The Moth is true stories told live. People often ask us, what are you looking for in a story? And that's a hard one to answer because there's no one thing. But some of the stuff you want in there, something at stake, a unique perspective, maybe a twist, and really important, details. Not all the details, but the details that are significant. Take this first story by Danusha Trevino. In lots of stories, details about clothing, what someone was wearing, might not be significant. But for Danusha, her thoughts on specific items of clothing really help us see the story through her eyes. You'll see what I mean. Danusha's got an accent. She's from Poland. But her story happened in the place she's made home, New York City. Here's Danusha.
So first thing I do when I do a tarot reading is I like to shuffle the cards. And as I do that, I ask you to let go of looking for answers and just ask for guidance.
You're listening to Imaginary Worlds, a show about how we create them and why we suspend our disbelief. I'm Eric Molinsky.
Okay, this is the Hermit. So this means that the work and the place that you come from has all been self-initiated, is that you build your world according to your own ideas of how the world should be. Sometimes it can...
That is Susan Wands. She's an author and a tarot card expert, although you'll hear her use the European pronunciation tarot. Now, I had actually never had a tarot or tarot reading before. I was a little skeptical and nervous. Like, on one hand, I didn't believe in it. On the other hand, I believed in it so much that I was actually worried she was going to tell me something horrible was about to happen to me. But actually, it was more like a therapy session with the cards doing the talking.